Emily Ward woke before dawn, long before the sun pushed its pale light across her small kitchen. The house was silent, still holding the chill of winter morning. She stood by the window, fingers wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest. Today was supposed to be simple, a weekend camping trip with her 8-year-old son, Noah, but her body felt wired with unease she couldn't name aloud. She moved quietly so she wouldn't wake him yet. Outside, the street was empty, washed in blue. For a moment she let herself imagine what peace might feel like if she weren't constantly glancing over her shoulder, waiting for another message, another reminder that she wasn't free. She didn't want Noah to notice, but he always did. He padded into the kitchen, dragging his dinosaur blanket. "We're still going, right?" he asked, voice small, hopeful. Emily forced a smile. "Of course." "Just us?" Noah nodded, though his eyes lingered on her face. She made him pancakes burnt at the edges, but he ate them without complaint, humming under his breath. She watched him, trying to memorize the moment. She wanted this trip to be a reset, a breath of safety before things got worse. When they finished packing the car, the sun had finally broken through the fog. Emily checked the locks twice, then the backseat, then the trunk. Noah tugged her sleeve. "Mom, we're fine." "I know," she said softly, though she didn't believe it. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. A single moment of silence filled the line, followed by a faint exhale. Emily hung up immediately, heart thudding. Noah stopped moving. "Is it him?" he whispered. She shook her head too quickly. "Just a wrong number." But Noah's expression told her he recognized the lie. They drove out of town with the radio off. The farther they got from the houses and noise, the easier it became for Emily to breathe. The towering evergreens felt like walls rising around them, protective, isolating. She hadn't told anyone exactly where they were going. Not Lily. Not the nosy neighbor. Not anyone who might let information slip. It was the first decision she had made in months that felt like hers alone. As the road twisted deeper into Olympic National Park, Noah pressed his face to the window. "It looks like the forest never ends," Emily nodded. "That's why it's perfect." But she kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights she recognized. When they reached the parking lot, only one other car sat in the far corner. The emptiness eased her nerves. Isolation meant safety. She helped Noah adjust his little backpack, tugging the straps until he laughed and swatted her hands away. "Mom, you're doing too much. I just want everything right." She crouched to tie his boot, but really she was giving herself a moment to breathe. Noah was the one part of her life untouched by fear, and she would do anything to keep it that way. They started down the trail, boots crunching over frost. The forest swallowed them quickly, tall trees, cold air, the smell of earth. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became, as if the woods were absorbing their footsteps. Emily tried to focus on the path, on Noah's small figure ahead of her, but the heavy feeling in her chest wouldn't lift. She kept glancing back, once, twice, unable to shake the sense that someone might be standing at the edge of the lot, watching them disappear into the shadows. Still, she kept walking. Somewhere behind her, something felt unfinished. But ahead, buried in the quiet, was the hope of a few days where the world couldn't reach them. She inhaled the cold air, trying to steady her thoughts. She didn't know that by nightfall, everything she feared, and everything she didn't, would already be closing in. The trail grew narrower as Emily and Noah hiked deeper into Olympic National Park, the early light weaving through the branches like thin threads of gold. The air felt colder here, heavier, as if the forest held its breath the moment they stepped inside. Noah walked a few steps ahead, humming the same tune he always used when he was trying to act brave. Emily recognized it instantly and felt her chest tighten. "Stay close," she called softly. "I am," he answered without turning. Their footsteps were the only sound for a while. Birds should have been singing, she thought. She had always remembered this park as alive, wind rushing through leaves, insects buzzing, distant water. But everything felt muted today, as if the trees were listening instead of moving. Noah stopped at a fork in the trail. "Left or right?" Emily studied the signpost. The left route led to a well-known overlook, a place families visited often. The right trail dipped deeper into the old-growth sections, quieter, less traveled, harder to track. She hesitated only a second before pointing right. "That way," Noah gave her a puzzled look. "I thought we were going to the cliffs." "We will later. Let's explore first." He accepted her answer with a shrug, but the doubt didn't disappear from his eyes. He wasn't too young to feel when something didn't add up, and lately he caught on to everything. They walked for nearly an hour. Emily tried to focus on the calming rhythm of hiking, the crunch of frost, the soft brush of branches, but her mind drifted. back to the phone call she'd received that morning, to the breath she thought she recognized. The way silence filled the line like someone savoring her fear. She shook her head, trying not to let the memory seep further into her thoughts. A branch snapped behind them. Emily spun so fast Noah jumped, but there was nothing. Just trees, old, thick, unmoving. "Mom," he whispered, "did you hear that? It's probably a deer." Noah didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, brushing his hand against hers, not holding it but keeping the distance small, the way he did when he felt unsafe. They continued a little quicker this time. The forest seemed to lean inward, arching into a tunnel of moss and shadow. Despite the cold, sweat gathered at the back of Emily's neck. She forced her breathing to remain steady, but each inhale came with a tremor. Noah suddenly stopped again. "Mom, can I ask something?" "Of course." He stared straight ahead. "Why are we walking so far? You usually get tired sooner." Emily's stomach tightened. She didn't know how to tell him the truth. That distance felt like protection, that every step into the woods made it harder for someone to find them. That her exhaustion meant nothing compared to the fear clawing at her. "I just wanted quiet," she managed. "Just for us." Noah nodded slowly, though she saw his throat tighten. He wasn't convinced, but he didn't push. They reached a clearing scattered with fallen logs. Light pooled in the open space, a brief relief from the claustrophobic trail. Noah dropped his backpack and took a sip of water. Emily scanned the edges of the clearing, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Then Noah asked the question she had been praying he wouldn't. "Do you think he's still following us?" Emily's breath hitched. She kept her face calm, eyes soft, voice low. "No, sweetheart, we're safe here." But the lie tasted bitter. Noah didn't argue. He simply lowered his gaze to the ground, and that silence told her everything. He knew she was lying. And worse, he knew why. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, stirring leaves into a spiral. It passed just as quickly, but Emily shivered. Something about the forest felt aware of them, the way a dark room feels different when someone else is in it. "We should set up camp before it gets dark," she said, though it was nowhere near evening. Noah didn't protest. He hoisted his backpack again. As they walked toward the deeper trail, Emily took one last look behind them. For a split second, she thought she saw something move between the trees. Just a flicker, a shadow slipping out of sight. But when she blinked, it was gone. She tightened her grip on Noah's shoulder and led him forward, unaware that the ground they were stepping into would be the last place anyone saw them for months. By the time Ranger Elias Boone reached the secluded campsite deep in Olympic National Park, the fog had settled so thick it clung to his jacket like damp cotton. Search crews had already swept this area once, but a pair of hikers reported hearing a child crying near dawn. That was enough to drag Elias back into the woods before sunrise. He stepped into the clearing and immediately knew something was wrong. Campsites always had a rhythm: fire pits, footprints, misplaced wrappers, signs of life. But this place felt abandoned in a way that was too sudden, too violent. The tent was slashed open across one side, the tier jagged as if someone ripped it in a blind panic. Sleeping bags spilled out, coated with dirt and pine needles. Nearby, a metal mug lay dented, as if stepped on or thrown. A small toy dinosaur was half buried in the soil, its painted eyes staring upward. Elias kneeled beside it. "Kid's toy," he muttered, his throat tightening. He had no children of his own, but he'd been in these woods long enough to know what belonged and what didn't. This wasn't a campsite someone casually walked away from. It was a place someone fled. He stood and scanned the perimeter. "Emily Ward, Noah Ward," he said their names softly, as if speaking them aloud could draw them from hiding. A deputy approached behind him. "Tracks lead north for a bit, then disappear like they were carried." "Carried?" Elias frowned. "Which one?" "Smaller prints vanish first, then the larger ones become erratic, stumbling. Like the adult was struggling." Elias looked deeper into the trees, where the trail dissolved into a wall of shadow. The air felt colder there, heavier. Something about it made the hair rise at the back of his neck. He walked the perimeter slowly, taking in every disturbed leaf, snapped twig, and stray fragment of fabric. The forest told stories if you listened closely enough. Today it whispered one word: fear. 30 feet from the tent, he found the first symbol carved into a tree trunk. A crude spiral, freshly etched, sap still bleeding. It wasn't decorative, it wasn't natural. And it wasn't something he'd ever seen on any official hiking landmark. "What the hell?" he murmured. Another deputy stepped up. "There's more, sir. At least 4 markings in a circular pattern around the clearing." A circle. Encircling the campsite. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Someone had been watching them. He crouched again, spotting a footprint half hidden under a layer of loose dirt. The shape was wrong, too large for Emily, too heavy. And the tread, he didn't recognize it from any common hiking boot. Did either of them have anyone hiking with them? He asked. No, just mother and son, no known associations. No one reported seeing them with a third person. Elias straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. Then whose tracks are these? The deputy hesitated. We're still trying to determine that. Elias scanned the woods again. Fog pooled between the trees like breath from something alive. He stepped toward the darker trail, his instincts pulling him forward. You think they're still alive? The deputy asked. I think something scared them bad enough to run, Elias said. People don't slash their own tents and bolt into the woods unless they're chased. He walked a few paces into the dense growth, noticing how quiet the forest had become. Even the birds were silent. That wasn't normal. Predators sometimes triggered silence, but not this kind. This was the quiet of anticipation, of something watching from deep within. He imagined Emily and Noah stepping into this darkness, fleeing without direction, clutching each other as night closed around them. Whatever drove them here hadn't stopped at the campsite. Mark Rowan, Elias muttered under his breath. He'd reviewed the missing persons report on the hike here. The name had stood out. The ex-partner, history of emotional volatility, custody arguments, a man who didn't like losing control. But he also knew better than to jump to conclusions without evidence. The forest lay before him like a maze of secrets. Emily and Noah had walked into it alive. Whether they walked out, that was another question. A crack echoed through the trees, sharp, distant, like a branch snapping under weight. Elias froze. The deputy looked at him. Another hiker? No, Elias whispered. That came from far deeper than any trail. He turned back toward the ruined campsite, toward the carved symbols, the scattered belongings, the footprints leading nowhere. Whatever happened here wasn't an accident. And tomorrow, Elias would have to face someone he hoped never to see involved in a case like this, the man whose shadow already stretched across every piece of evidence. The father. Mark Rowan arrived at the ranger station with the kind of confidence that didn't belong to a man whose ex-partner and child had vanished. He walked through the doorway like he owned the room, shoulders squared, jaw tight, dressed in a pressed jacket that looked too clean for someone supposedly frantic with worry. Elias Boone watched him closely, noting every detail. The controlled breathing, the calculated frown, the way his eyes swept the area before landing on the search map pinned to the wall. You're the one in charge? Mark asked, voice calm but sharpened at the edges. I'm leading the field team, Elias replied. Ranger Boone, Mark nodded once, not polite, measured. I came as soon as I heard, he said, though Elias noticed he wasn't out of breath or disoriented from any rush. Where were they last seen? Elias motioned him into a small briefing room. Mark took the seat closest to the head of the table, as if out of habit. Elias sat opposite him, folding his hands. The silence stretched just long enough to reveal the tension beneath Mark's composure. We found Emily and Noah's campsite, Elias began. It was disturbed. Mark's jaw twitched. Disturbed how? Slashed tent, scattered supplies, signs of a struggle, tracks showing someone carried the child. And markings carved around the clearing. For the first time, something flickered in Mark's expression, surprise, confusion, or something darker. It was gone a second later. Emily's always been dramatic, he said lightly. Maybe she panicked. She gets in her own head sometimes. Elias studied him. Panic doesn't carve symbols around a campsite. Mark exhaled sharply, leaning back. Look, Emily sees danger where there isn't any. She thinks people are after her. She thinks I'm after her? He let out a humorless laugh. I'm not. I have a life, Ranger. And yet she never filed a single false report, Elias said. Every complaint she made held just enough truth to raise flags. Mark's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? That you were a significant presence in her life, Elias answered evenly. And people don't run for no reason. Mark didn't respond. He simply crossed his arms, gaze drifting toward the small window overlooking the tree line. The movement revealed a scar on his wrist, thin, pale, precise. Elias wondered if Emily had noticed details like that. People who lived in fear tended to memorize everything about the person causing it. Elias opened a folder and slid a photograph across the table. You recognize this? Mark looked down. It was a picture from one of Emily's custody records. Emily standing stiffly, Noah pressed against her side, Mark just behind them with a hand hovering near her shoulder. Not touching, just close enough to suggest ownership. Mark's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. That was years ago. But tension like that doesn't just vanish, Elias said. Emily told friends she was afraid you'd fight for custody again. Mark scoffed. Afraid I'd want to be in my son's life? What a crime. You threatened her, Elias said quietly. Mark leaned forward. "Show me proof." Elias didn't answer. He simply held Mark's stare, matching his intensity. Mark looked away first. "She always exaggerates," Mark muttered. "She thinks I'm some monster hiding in her closet. She thinks everyone is watching her." "But is anyone?" Elias asked, voice slow, deliberate. "Were you watching her?" Mark's eyes flashed. For the first time, he didn't look composed. He looked irritated, cornered. "I didn't follow her into the woods," he snapped. "I haven't even seen her for weeks." Elias let the words linger. "Where were you 3 nights ago?" "At home, alone." "No one to confirm that?" Mark's silence was answer enough. Elias closed the folder. "Your relationship with Emily is relevant, Mr. Rowan, whether you like it or not." Mark stood abruptly. "You think I hurt them?" "I think we don't have the full story," Elias replied. "And I think you know more about Emily's fear than you're saying." Mark's jaw clenched so tightly Elias wondered if he might finally break through that polished exterior. Instead, Mark stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he paused, fingers gripping the frame. "If she ran," he said softly, "it wasn't because of me. It was because she can't trust her own mind." And then he walked out. Elias remained seated, staring at the empty doorway. Something in Mark's tone had shifted from irritation to something colder, something practiced. People who were truly innocent didn't speak like that, and people who felt wrongfully accused didn't hide behind half-truths. He rose, pulling on his jacket. The forest was waiting. Emily and Noah were out there somewhere, alive, he hoped. The deeper Elias went into this case, the more he sensed the shadows weren't just in the trees. They were in the people connected to them. Tomorrow, he would speak to the one person who knew Emily better than anyone else, her sister. 3 months had passed since Emily and Noah vanished into Olympic National Park, and the small town was gradually settling into a muted despair. Posters lined lampposts, fluttering in the winter wind, each one a silent plea. "Have you seen Emily Ward? Have you seen Noah Ward?" Their faces stared from every corner of town, eyes wide, smiling, frozen in time while life went on around them. But for Lily Ward, Emily's younger sister, nothing moved forward. Everything stopped the day they disappeared. Lily stood at the edge of her sister's house, arms wrapped around herself against the sharp December air. Her gaze lingered on the driveway where Emily's car had last been parked, still coated in frost. It seemed impossible that anyone could vanish so completely without leaving a trace. She bit her lip, tasting the bitter tang of frustration. No leads, no sightings, just silence. 3 months of silence that screamed louder than any alarm. Inside, she met with Elias Boone again. The ranger had become a constant presence, a grim face of hope and dread. He handed her a folder, its pages filled with photographs of broken branches, scattered belongings, and faint footprints leading nowhere. "We've combed every trail multiple times," Elias said, his tone measured but heavy with unspoken concern. "There's no concrete evidence they left the park on their own. It's as if someone or something pulled them further in." Lily's hand trembled as she reached for one of the photos, Emily's torn sleeping bag, dirt-streaked and abandoned. How could they just disappear?" she whispered. "It doesn't make sense." Elias didn't answer immediately. He could only shake his head. "People think forests are just trees. They're not. This park, it's alive in ways most don't understand. Tracks fade, items get lost, and sometimes people vanish." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Lily had always been rational, grounded, but rational didn't explain her sister's absence. She wanted to scream, to force the world to acknowledge the gap left behind. But all she could do was stare at the photographs, memorizing every detail of her sister's life now frozen in a frame of ruin. At night, Lily would replay every memory, conversations, arguments, subtle warnings she hadn't understood. Emily had been anxious lately, obsessive even about Noah's safety. She had grown hyper-aware, double-checking locks, scanning for anyone who might be watching. Lily had brushed it off as nervousness, never suspecting that the world outside their home could manifest the danger Emily had feared. Meanwhile, in the forest, Elias retraced the same trails again and again. The fog hung lower with each patrol, blanketing the undergrowth, giving the landscape a sense of foreboding. He found small shelters hidden behind fallen logs and piles of leaves, likely used by animals, or perhaps by people hiding. Every step deepened the mystery. Footprints that didn't match known hikers, shallow depressions in moss that suggested recent habitation. The woods whispered of survival, desperation, and terror. Back at home, Lily coordinated volunteers, neighbors, and search teams, but exhaustion quickly claimed most of them. She alone pushed forward, obsessed with the thought that Emily and Noah might still be alive, somewhere just out of reach. She replayed conversations Elias had with her, notes he had jotted about the strange carvings near the campsite. Each clue, however minor, became a thread to follow. Then one afternoon, a message arrived from another hiker. A faint, almost dismissible report. A child's voice crying somewhere deep in the forest, just past a dense thicket near the northern ridges. It was barely audible over the static of the call, but the words were enough to ignite a spark of hope and terror. Elias listened, tense, knowing that if it was true, Emily and Noah had survived, but at what cost? The forest was no longer a sanctuary, it was a cage. Lily stared at the map in disbelief. 3 months, she muttered. 3 months and they're still out there. Elias met her eyes. We have to find them before the cold, and isolation take more than just their freedom. We need to move quickly. The forest waited silently, hiding its secrets beneath a thick layer of fog and shadow. And somewhere deep inside, Emily and Noah were still moving, still hiding, still fighting to survive. As night fell, Elias readied his team. Flashlights, radios, thermal sensors, anything to pierce the darkness. He knew that what they might find would not just test their endurance, but challenge the very line between reality and fear. And as the search stretched deeper into Olympic National Park, one thought lingered in every mind. The mother and son were still alive. Somewhere. But what had survived them might have survived in them too, the fear, the hunger, and the madness. The fog settled over Olympic National Park like a heavy, damp blanket, muffling the world and swallowing the edges of the trail. Ranger Elias Boone led his small team cautiously through the dense undergrowth, boots sinking into wet moss, flashlights cutting through the gray haze. The forest was quieter than it should have been. Even the wind hesitated among the towering evergreens. Every step felt like trespassing into a hidden realm where the rules of sound and light didn't apply. Then it came. A high-pitched, trembling cry. At first, Elias thought it was an animal, a fox or a bobcat, but the sound repeated, longer and more desperate, human. A child, Noah's voice. "Did you hear that?" one of the deputies whispered. Elias nodded, his heart tightening. "Stay alert. Move slowly." Every instinct screamed that the child might be near, but so might whatever had driven them into this forest in the first place. He motioned the team forward, every shadow suddenly suspicious. They followed the voice deeper into the fog. Twigs snapped underfoot, leaves brushed against sleeves. The cry came again, so close it seemed to echo in the very trees, then vanish. They rounded a bend and discovered a small clearing littered with debris. Branches bent unnaturally, scraps of clothing partially buried in mud, and remnants of makeshift shelters built from pine boughs. Whoever had been here had been surviving for weeks. "Look at this," Elias muttered. He knelt beside a patch of flattened moss. The impression of footprints was clear, small ones, likely Noah's, alongside larger ones that struggled to maintain balance on the uneven ground. He traced the prints with his gloved fingers. "They've been moving this way, and carrying something," he added quietly, recognizing the telltale drag marks. The fog shifted, revealing more signs of habitation. A crude circle of stones that could have been a fire pit, broken twigs arranged like traps, a makeshift fence of fallen logs. It was meticulous, intentional. Whoever was here had been planning, hiding, waiting. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't random wandering, it was survival. Then movement, something or someone darted between the trees at the far edge of the clearing. Elias froze. "Wait!" he hissed, signaling the team to stop. The figure paused, crouched low, clutching something small. A child, Noah, and beside him curled protectively a woman, Emily. Noah's voice rang out, shrill with fear. "Mom! Don't let them take me." The sound cut through the fog like a knife. Emily's hair was matted, her clothes torn, mud caked across her face. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and wild. She held Noah close, arms wrapped so tightly he seemed almost swallowed by her embrace. Every instinct screamed protection, desperation, and the raw edge of a mind frayed by months of terror. Elias raised a hand slowly, careful not to startle her. "It's us. We're here to help," he said, voice steady. The team spread out but remained cautious, aware that approaching too quickly could provoke panic. Emily didn't respond. She rocked slightly, whispering words too faint to catch. Noah clung to her neck, eyes wide, staring at the shadows around them. The forest seemed to press in, and even Elias felt the oppressive weight of it, as if the trees themselves had been keeping watch, waiting for this moment. A deputy stepped forward carefully. "Ma'am, we just want to take you and the boy to safety." Emily's eyes flickered toward him, but she didn't let go of Noah. She muttered something under her breath, words jumbled and broken, half prayers, half commands, before spinning slightly, keeping him shielded. She rocked him closer, lips pressed against his hair. The sound of her whispering carried a strange rhythm of love and fear entwined. Elias glanced at his team. We need to move slowly. No sudden gestures. This wasn't just a rescue, it was delicate. Every approach had to honor the fragile boundary between mother and child, sanity and panic. As the fog shifted again, it revealed the path back to the main trail, but Emily wouldn't budge. She had claimed this forest, this clearing, as their world. It had kept them alive. And now, facing the unknown beyond, she hesitated. Elias lowered his voice. Ma'am, you're safe, but you can't stay here. Emily's grip tightened on Noah. She whispered once more, a single fragmented sentence. They'll take him if I let go. Elias nodded slightly. We'll protect him, I promise. The team waited tense, knowing the next moment would determine whether months of survival ended in safety or spiraled into chaos. And in the distance, the fog swallowed the rest of the forest, hiding secrets that might never see daylight. Emily's world had narrowed to the circle of her arms around Noah. Months of isolation had sharpened her senses, but dulled everything else. The forest was home now. Every smell, every sound, every shifting shadow had been catalogued, memorized, and feared. She had survived, yes, but at the cost of her mind. The fog of the early morning hadn't lifted. It clung to the soil and the trees, creeping up her legs like tiny fingers. She had learned to move silently, to make nothing permanent in the forest that could be tracked. But now the noise of approaching voices pierced through the thickets, pulling her from her fragile equilibrium. Emily, it's us. We're here to help. Ranger Elias Boone's voice rang out, steady and cautious. She stiffened, whispering something to Noah that made his small body tremble. He clutched her neck, burying his face in her chest. Don't let them take me, he whispered, and she kissed the top of his head, rocking him like a frightened animal. Survival instincts flared. The world beyond the clearing was dangerous, filled with people who couldn't be trusted. A deputy stepped forward slowly, hands raised. Ma'am, we just want to get you both to safety. No one's going to hurt you. Emily's eyes flickered to him briefly, wild and unblinking, then returned to Noah. She muttered a string of words under her breath, jumbled and broken, half prayers and half warnings. She rocked back and forth, shaking, until the ground beneath her was cold and damp. Her knees sank into the mud, her hands gripping Noah like he was the only tether to reality. To her, letting go even slightly meant letting danger in. She could not survive that again. Elias knelt a few feet away, voice soft but firm. Emily, you're safe. We're not going to hurt you. Noah's safe too. We just want to help you both. The words seemed to register in her mind, but only as a distant echo. She didn't release her son. She didn't stand. The forest had taken up residence in her body and mind. The outside world had become a phantom that she couldn't trust. Every snapping twig, every shifting shadow felt like a threat. Her breathing was ragged, uneven, and she shivered violently, mud clinging to her hair, her clothes, her skin. Noah's small arms clung tightly around her neck, eyes wide and blinking, sensing both fear and fierce protection radiating from his mother. A deputy handed Elias a thermal blanket and slowly approached, draping it over Emily's shoulders without breaking eye contact. She stiffened, but didn't resist. Elias motioned for the medic team to come closer, ready to sedate if necessary. They had to be careful. Any sudden movement could push her over the edge. Months of deprivation, fear, and trauma had transformed Emily into someone the world no longer recognized. Not the Emily Ward they had known, but a woman fused with survival instinct, unbroken by logic or reason. Minutes stretched as they coaxed her to stand, the mud making every movement labored. Noah's small legs were weak from lack of proper food and rest, but he clung to her as if she were the only solid ground left. Finally, Emily rose slowly, keeping him pressed against her chest. Her eyes darted from shadow to shadow, but the voices of Elias and the team were patient, controlled, unwavering. You're safe, Elias repeated, inching closer. We're going to take care of you now. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Emily's lips trembled, finally letting out a small, broken sigh. It wasn't relief, at least not fully, but the tension that had held her body taut for months loosened fractionally. Noah looked up at her, confused and scared, but trusting her implicitly. The fog around them shifted, sunlight beginning to break through in faint streaks, and for the first time the forest didn't feel entirely threatening. It was still alive, still watching, but for now the danger had paused. As they began to move slowly back toward the path leading to the main trail, Elias kept a careful eye on both mother and child. Emily's wild gaze softened only slightly, but her body remained tense, defensive, unyielding. She had survived the forest. She had kept Noah alive, and in doing so, she had changed. They would soon be out of the trees, into safety, but Emily's mind would remain trapped in the wilderness for a while longer. The medic team and deputies flanked them, moving cautiously. Every step was deliberate, measured, guided by patience and empathy. And though the clearing receded behind them, the memory of the forest, the terror, and the survival instinct that had fused mother and son together would follow them wherever they went. The rescue was complete, but the recovery, the understanding of what had happened inside that 3-month nightmare had only just begun. Emily sat on the edge of the hospital bed, legs drawn close, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The fluorescent lights above were harsh, sterile, a stark contrast to the muted greens and grays of the forest that had become her world. The medic team had cleaned the mud and leaves from her hair and clothes, but the dirt lingered in her mind, interwoven with every sound, every shadow, every breath of wind that had stalked her and Noah for months. The forest had shaped her, reshaped her, and now that she was back in civilization, the walls seemed to close in with every passing second. Noah sat beside her, small and trembling, his hands clutching hers as though his own existence depended on the connection. His eyes, wide and wary, darted from the ceiling to the door, never resting. "Mom, are they going to come for us?" he whispered, voice shaking. Emily's lips pressed together. She didn't answer immediately. The world had taught her that words could be dangerous. Misstep once and everything could unravel. Slowly, she shook her head. "No, no one can touch you now," she said, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. The psychologist, Dr. Sarah Mills, entered the room quietly, notebook in hand, her presence calm but authoritative. "Emily," she began softly, "we're going to take this one step at a time. We need to understand what happened out there." Emily's eyes snapped toward her, wild and untrusting. "Understand?" she hissed, voice cracking. "They were everywhere, he was everywhere, Noah." Her words tumbled into each other, frantic, disjointed. Her body shook, hands gripping her knees, nails digging into skin. The trauma of months spent hiding, running, surviving had compressed into a single, unbroken chain of fear and hyper-awareness. Elias Boone stood quietly near the door, watching, noting her expressions. He had seen survivors of the forest before, lost hikers, stranded campers, but nothing like this. Emily's mind was not merely traumatized. It was a landscape transformed by terror and hyperprotective obsession. The edges of reality and imagination had blurred into a constant, underlying paranoia. "Emily," Dr. Mills continued gently, kneeling to be level with her, "I need you to tell me, as best you can, what really happened. Just step by step." Emily's gaze shifted to Noah, then back to the floor. She spoke in a trembling whisper. "It wasn't safe, not ever. I kept him close. I had to. I saw him, watching, following. Every night he was there. I couldn't let him touch the ground alone. I couldn't." Her voice broke. She curled inward, shivering. Elias noted the words carefully. Was she describing hallucinations or reality? In the forest, perception and threat intertwined. Fear could manifest as vision, sound, sensation. And yet some part of her certainty seemed rooted in truth, an instinct honed to protect her son at any cost. Dr. Mills reached out slowly. "You protected Noah, that's what mattered. You survived and he survived. But now, Emily, we have to separate what was real from what your mind created to keep him safe." Emily shook her head violently. "No, I saw him, he was there. If I let go, they would have taken him." Her words punctuated the room with a desperate, jagged energy. It was impossible to argue. Her reality and the forest's terror had fused into one indelible memory. Noah leaned against her shoulder, whispering, "Mom, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Emily's gaze softened slightly, a fraction of trust returning. But the wildness in her eyes lingered. She had survived isolation, deprivation, and relentless fear. Civilization now felt alien, fragile. Every sound, every movement, every stranger was a potential threat. Elias exchanged a glance with Dr. Mills. The forest had returned her alive, but at a psychological cost. Emily's mind, fractured and sharpened by survival, would take weeks, perhaps months, to navigate. There were truths embedded in her trauma, truths that only she and Noah carried. And understanding them would be key to piecing together what had really happened in the woods. As Dr. Mills guided her to take a few deep breaths, Emily closed her eyes, clinging to Noah, the last tether to the reality she trusted. And in that fragile moment, one thought persisted. The forest was gone, but its shadows were not. Her mind was a map of fear, survival, and unspoken truths waiting to be uncovered. The sun had just begun to pierce the canopy of Olympic National Park, scattering dappled light across the forest floor, when Ranger Elias Boone returned alone to the northern ridge. Weeks of searching, tracing, and waiting had led him here, back to the area where Emily and Noah had vanished 3 months earlier. He carried only a small backpack, a trowel, and a notebook, determined to confront the forest's secrets before anyone disturbed the fragile evidence again. The clearing that had been Emily and Noah's refuge was nearly invisible now. Fallen leaves covered the footprints, frost glimmered across the branches, and only the faint outline of flattened moss hinted at their past presence. Elias knelt and ran his fingers over the ground, feeling the subtle depressions. The forest had reclaimed its space, but the traces of survival and desperation were still etched in the soil. Something here was hidden, something Emily had carried with her in silence. He followed a faint trail that led deeper into the old-growth pines. Every step was careful, deliberate. The air was thick, humid, and still. The scent of damp earth and pine resin hung heavy. Then he noticed it, a small indentation beneath a cluster of roots, partially concealed by decaying leaves. Kneeling, he began to dig slowly, brush by brush, mindful not to disturb anything that could hold meaning. Minutes passed before his fingers hit something hard. Dirt gave way to fabric, then metal. Heart-pounding, he uncovered a small tin box, rusted but intact. Inside, papers were folded tightly, mud-streaked and brittle. Elias carefully removed them, noting handwriting he instantly recognized. Emily's. The contents were chaotic, a mixture of notes, sketches, and fragmented thoughts, but they told a story that no search report could. She had documented everything. The movement of the sun and shadows, the sound of the creek, patterns of animal tracks, and, most importantly, every encounter she thought was threatening. There were diagrams of the carved symbols in the clearing, maps showing where they had hidden supplies, and notes about footprints that hadn't matched her own or Noah's. Elias' eyes widened. Someone or something had been watching them in the forest. One page stood out, a frantic, near-illegible entry detailing an encounter with a figure at the edge of the clearing. Emily had drawn the person as a shadowy outline, faceless, looming over Noah while she cowered. Her words were jagged. "He's always there, watching, waiting. I cannot leave Noah, not for a second. If I do, he will take him." Elias frowned. The handwriting was desperate, yes, but the details were consistent with other reports. The stranger's presence may have been real. Or Emily's mind, honed by isolation and fear, had magnified every flicker of movement. Either way, it confirmed her terror and her vigilance. She had survived because she had not underestimated the forest or the potential threat. He dug further and found another object, a small, crudely carved wooden figurine, dirt-encrusted and hidden beneath roots. The craftsmanship was rough but intentional, clearly meant as a talisman, something Emily had carried to protect Noah, perhaps even herself. Every element here told a story of survival, ingenuity, and the psychological weight she bore. The forest had shaped her into someone unrecognizable, someone capable of outlasting extreme isolation and unseen threats. Elias packed the items carefully, feeling the weight of their significance. These were more than artifacts. They were testimony. Emily and Noah's survival was not just luck. It was strategy, instinct, and fear distilled into action. He noted every location, every subtle mark in the soil, knowing this evidence could help reconstruct the events in ways words alone never could. As he stood, the wind rustled the pines, carrying with it a whisper of the past. Elias looked toward the clearing, imagining Emily and Noah huddled together, eyes wide, moving silently through the shadows. The forest had held them captive, shaped them, and tested them. Now it held the clues to the truth that the outside world had been too slow to see. He pocketed the final note and started back toward the main trail. Every step through the soft, damp earth brought a renewed sense of purpose. Soon, the fragments of Emily's mind, Noah's fear, and the forest's shadow would converge into understanding. And with it, justice, clarity, and the reckoning that awaited those who had cast fear into their lives. The buried truth in the pines had finally begun to reveal itself. Emily's hands shook as she held Noah close in the quiet room of the rehabilitation facility. Her body was exhausted, every muscle trembling from months of strain, but her mind was a tempest she could not calm. Outside, the world moved normally, people spoke, cars passed, clocks ticked. But inside, the memories of the forest remained vivid, alive, clawing at her thoughts. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves was a pulse in her veins. And yet there was one truth she clung to above all: Noah was safe. Elias Boone stood across the room, observing her carefully. The months of searching, tracing, and discovery had culminated in this fragile moment. Emily's resilience had kept them alive. Her vigilance had shielded Noah from the unknown dangers lurking in the park. But survival had exacted a cost. The woman who now stared at the floor was not the same Emily Ward who had entered the woods. That Emily would have fought, fled, and protected her son at any cost. This Emily trembled at shadows, muttered warnings under her breath, and recoiled at sudden movement. A nurse adjusted Noah's blanket. "He needs to eat," she said softly. "You should take a break." Emily's eyes flicked to the child, and she shook her head violently. "No, I'll stay. I promised him I'd never let go." Her voice cracked under the weight of the promise, revealing layers of guilt, fear, and fierce determination. She shifted, curling around Noah as if she could physically shield him from every possible harm. Elias stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Emily, you did everything a mother could. You survived the forest, kept Noah safe. You've done more than anyone could have expected." Emily's gaze snapped to him, eyes wide, searching for any hint of betrayal or doubt. For months, her mind had been attuned to threats invisible to the ordinary eye. Now her instinct warred with reality, unsure if the protection she had relied on was still necessary. She gripped Noah's hand tighter, whispering, "They'll come, they'll try again if I let go." "Listen to me," Elias said, kneeling so he was level with her. "No one's coming, you're safe, he's safe. The woods can't reach you here." She hesitated, muscles rigid, eyes darting toward the window as if expecting a shadow to emerge from the parking lot. Then slowly she exhaled. It was uneven, shuddering, but it was a start. Her grip loosened just enough for Noah to wiggle a little, placing his small hands over hers. "Mom," Noah's voice was soft, fragile. "Are we really safe?" Emily's lips quivered. "Yes, yes, we are." But even as she said it, a part of her mind remained alert, calculating, ready to react to the slightest signal of danger. Survival had been hardwired into her during the months in the forest, and breaking that instinct required time, patience, and trust. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against Noah's hair. Her thoughts flickered to the forest, the twisted branches, the hidden shadows, the cold nights she had endured, but she forced them aside. Those memories were a part of her survival, not her present. And survival was not just about living, it was about protecting. She had done what a mother would do. She had endured, fought, and refused to surrender. Elias watched, silent. He had seen countless survivors, but Emily's instinctive ferocity, her ability to merge fear and love into an unbroken shield around her child, was extraordinary. It was both frightening and inspiring, a testament to what a parent could endure to protect their child. Hours passed as they sat together in silence, the tension slowly ebbing from her body. Noah finally rested his head on her shoulder, and Emily allowed herself a long, shaky exhale. The journey was far from over. Therapy, reintegration, and healing awaited them, but for now, the mother and son had reclaimed a small pocket of safety. Outside the window, sunlight pierced through the lingering morning fog, illuminating the edges of the world beyond the room. For the first time since the forest, Emily felt a fragile, tenuous connection to reality. A reminder that, though the shadows of survival still clung to her mind, the bond she had forged with Noah would guide her forward. She squeezed his hand once firmly, a promise without words. Whatever horrors the forest had inflicted, whatever dangers had lurked unseen, she had done what she had to do. And she would do it again every time for her son. Emily stood in the small clearing outside the rehabilitation facility, Noah pressed firmly against her chest. Her grip was fierce, unrelenting, and every instinct in her body screamed that if she loosened even slightly, the world would steal him away again. Months in the forest had fused her fear and love into a single, visceral drive. She was both protector and predator now, vigilant and unyielding. Her hair was damp from the morning dew, clothes wrinkled and dirty from days of restless pacing, but she didn't notice. Nothing existed outside her son's presence. People watching from the edges of the facility whispered under their breaths, unsure whether she was fragile or dangerous. To them, she appeared unhinged, wide-eyed, muttering, rocking gently back and forth while holding her child as if the ground itself were a threat. But Emily didn't care. Reality had narrowed to this. Noah was alive, and she would not risk losing him again. "Mom, I'm okay," Noah whispered, small fingers tracing patterns across her arms. "I know," Emily murmured, voice trembling. "I know you're okay, I'm just—" Her words faltered, the tremor betraying months of fear, anxiety, and the mental strain of survival. She closed her eyes, letting memories of the forest flood her mind. The rustling leaves that signaled danger, the shadows that moved silently, the nights when Noah's cries had been her only guide. Those months had burned into her psyche, leaving her hyper-aware, desperate, and exhausted. Ranger Elias Boone approached carefully, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Emily, it's all right. Noah's safe. You're both safe. You've done everything right." She glanced at him, eyes wild, assessing the threat in every movement, every sound. Do you understand?" she asked, voice low but urgent. "I kept him alive because I never let go, never, not for 1 second. You don't know what it's like out there." Elias nodded slowly. "I know enough. I know you protected him. I know how strong you are." Emily exhaled shakily, rocking slightly, the physical rhythm a remnant of her months in hiding. She muttered under her breath, words half-formed. "They'll never take him. Never." Her lips pressed against Noah's hair as she whispered promises she wasn't sure she believed in herself. A nurse and psychologist stepped forward, prepared to intervene gently, but Elias raised a hand. "Give her time. Let her adjust at her own pace. She's survived everything. They won't break her now." Emily's body trembled, but she held him tighter, as if the weight of her own fear could shield them both. She rocked slowly, whispering fragments of comfort to Noah and herself. To the outside world, she seemed insane, unhinged, a woman unable to release her child. But in truth, her grip was the culmination of 3 months of constant vigilance, terror, and unyielding love. The forest had shaped her into this, fierce, protective, and unwilling to risk life for the sake of appearances. Noah's small hand brushed her cheek. "Mom, it's okay," he said, voice hesitant but steady. "We're together. I'm not going anywhere." Emily blinked, eyes wet, and her grip softened fractionally. She was exhausted, body and mind worn to the edge, but the tether between them remained unbroken. Elias took a cautious step closer. "You don't have to fight it alone anymore. We'll help you both." Emily's gaze darted briefly toward him, searching for deception, threat, or betrayal, then returned to Noah. She nodded slowly, the faintest hint of trust returning. Her body relaxed slightly, but the hold remained protective, instinctive. Months in the wilderness had taught her that vigilance saved lives. She would never forget that lesson. Sunlight fell across the clearing, catching dust and dew in shimmering specks. The fog that had once obscured the forest trails was gone, replaced by clarity, warmth, and the quiet hum of the world returning to normal. Yet Emily remained vigilant, a mother forged in the crucible of fear and survival. Holding Noah tight, looking insane to anyone who didn't understand, she embodied the raw power of a parent's love, uncompromising, unyielding, and absolute. For Emily, the forest was behind them, but the lessons it had etched into her mind remained. And as long as Noah was in her arms, she was ready to face any shadow, any threat, any uncertainty. The outside world might never comprehend what she had endured, but one truth was undeniable. She had done everything a mother would do, and she would do it again every time to keep her son alive. Weeks had passed since Emily and Noah were pulled from the forest, yet the shadows of Olympic National Park lingered in their minds like faint, persistent echoes. The rehabilitation center had become a liminal space, safe, structured, yet sterile and alien compared to the wild rhythms they had lived by. Emily still clutched Noah often, arms tight, eyes scanning every corner as if the world might erupt into danger at any second. But gradually, fragments of normalcy began to creep back. The soft warmth of sunlight, the smell of cooked food, the muted hum of distant voices. Elias Boone visited regularly, a steady presence guiding both mother and son through this delicate transition. "You're doing well," he reassured Emily one morning, his voice low and even. "Every day, little by little, you're coming back from the forest." Emily nodded, though the taut lines of her face remained. I don't know how to let go," she admitted, voice tight. "The forest, it's still in me. Every sound, every shadow, I can't help but." Her hands clutched Noah, who now rested against her shoulder, sleepy but alert. "I can't risk him." "No one expects you to," Elias said gently. "Survival changed you, but you've made it this far. That's proof you can adapt, that you can survive here too." Noah yawned and murmured something unintelligible, burrowing closer. Emily's lips curved faintly, her first true smile in months. It was fragile, tentative, but real. She had carried him through darkness and isolation, and now she could begin to carry herself through the remnants of the trauma. Dr. Sarah Mills entered, carrying a notebook and a soft, understanding gaze. "Emily, today we'll start some exercises," she said. "Small steps, focus on presence, breathing, connection. Noah can participate too, you're not alone." Emily's eyes flickered to her son. He nodded, a quiet trust radiating from him. She drew a deep, shaky breath and exhaled, trying to release the tension coiled in her shoulders, her back, her limbs. Months of hypervigilance could not be erased in a single morning, but she could start to loosen the grip on fear while holding tightly to hope. The exercises were simple but deliberate: grounding, mindfulness, gentle movement. Emily followed Dr. Mill's guidance, eyes closing briefly to feel the texture of the floor beneath her hands, the warmth of sunlight spilling across the room. Noah mimicked her movements, small and uncertain, but trusting her implicitly. For a moment, mother and son were not survivors of terror. They were simply human, present in the light. Afterward, Emily stepped outside with Noah. The late morning sun warmed their skin, shadows retreating to reveal the gentle curves of the garden outside the center. Birds chirped in trees overhead, the wind rustled leaves softly, and the scent of pine mingled with fresh earth. The forest was behind them, distant but indelible, and the world outside felt vast, unthreatening, alive. Emily stopped in the center of the courtyard, still holding Noah close. "It's okay," she whispered almost to herself. "It's okay to live, it's okay to breathe." Her eyes scanned the horizon, seeing the ordinary details, the fence, the walking paths, the distant mountains, as symbols of safety rather than danger. Noah tugged gently at her arm. "Mom, can we go to the swing?" Emily laughed softly, a sound both tentative and genuine. She nodded. "Yes, let's go." As they walked, she allowed herself to loosen her grip fractionally, enough that Noah could reach for her hand freely. It was a small gesture, but monumental. The trust that had sustained them in the forest now extended into the outside world. The bond was no longer solely about survival. It was about living, experiencing, and moving forward together. Elias watched from a distance, silent but observant. The mother and son had emerged from unimaginable fear, but they were more than survivors. They were resilient, adaptive, and determined to reclaim their lives. Emily's eyes met his briefly, and he saw recognition. She would never forget the forest, the terror, or the lessons it had forced upon her. But she could carry them, integrate them, and still step into the light. As the sun climbed higher, Emily pushed Noah on the swing, laughter spilling freely now, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the world. The shadow of fear remained, yes, but it no longer ruled them. Together, mother and son embraced the ordinary, fragile, and luminous reality beyond the forest. The ordeal had ended, but their story, their bond, their survival, their unyielding love, would endure. And in that quiet, golden morning, holding her son, Emily finally understood the measure of what she had done, and the life that still awaited them both. A life reclaimed, a light returned.